Good afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Success Sadhana. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to a program today. Spiritualize your senses. As you all know, Vaish, who was a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk, and who typically leads these sessions. He is on a 2-week trip to Europe, but he has encouraged us to continue to meet and discuss spiritual topics so that we can keep the transcendental vibration going. So thanks, Linda, Mac, Manish, and Mayank for joining today. And we do have 10 members on Facebook who are also live. I see M. Partha also joining. So thank you all. And thanks to Shweka for managing the social media. So this topic, I thought we'll start with a very basic, simple verse from Letter of Instruction today, which discusses some of the sense control topics. But before we do that, as Vaish typically encourages us to become a little more centered before we start discussing some special topics. So let's spend a few minutes to do some mantra, do some breath meditation so that we can be centered. So please sit up a little straight than usual. So just sit straight than you were a minute ago so that we can do some breathing exercise. Close your eyes and please take deep breaths than normal. And as you take this deep breath, please focus on your breath. The mind is always interested to keep jumping from one thing to next. But when you ask it to focus, when you ask to place attention on your breath, you'll see mind will cooperate. And you can see that your body will slowly start relaxing. So please deep breath in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out. Now we'll use the power of our attention and focus it on your feet. Please request your feet to relax. Keep taking deep breaths, but place your attention on your feet and ask you to relax. Unhook from the stress. Focus on your legs and request you to relax. Deep breath in, out. Focus on your thighs, your stomach, your chest, and request all of them to relax. Relax. Focus on your arms, shoulders, and request them to relax. Deep breath in, deep breath out. In, out. Focus on your neck, cheek, your face, and request you to relax. Focus on your eyes, your eyebrows, and request you to relax. Deep breath in, deep breath out. In, out. Focus on your forehead, your head, and request you to relax. Deep breath in, deep breath out. Now we'll chant few mantras and feel the vibration of the mantra. We'll chant the Om mantra. So take deep breath in, then we'll chant Om. So let's take deep breath in. Om. Deep breath in. Om. Deep breath in. Deep breath in. Deep breath in. Please feel the vibration in the heart region, in the face, solar plexus. Be grateful for the opportunity to do mantra meditation today. Now lightly rub your hands, open your eyes. Let's come back to the Zoom room. Thank you, Jesse, JK, Mark, Kamila, and Raj for joining today. I hope you all are doing well. So today we'll discuss the first text of Nectar of Instruction. Linda just shared, thank you, Jim. That was so needed after a challenging work week. I fully agree. Even I needed it badly, and I'm happy to get the opportunity. So as I mentioned, let me share my screen. So today we'll discuss the first text in Nectar of Instruction. Nectar of Instruction is a wisdom text written hundreds of years ago by Rupa Goswami. He was a very exalted spiritual teacher, and he wrote a book, Nectar of Instruction, primarily for spiritual practitioners, those students who are trying to advance in spiritual knowledge and purify their consciousness. So he gave them 11 instructions that they can follow so that they can become a better spiritual person. And this is the first text, first verse in that. And the Sanskrit verse goes like this. Vacho vegam, manasa krodha vegam, jivva vegam, udropastha vegam, etan vegan yo vishaheta dhira, sarvam apimam dhatim cha sishyat. The translation: a sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the action of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals is qualified to make disciples all over the world. And when I was thinking, like, he starts with self-control. He places that if you want to make progress in your spiritual life, then controlling your senses is one of the first step which is required so that you can be more focused on your spiritual activity. So towards that, I have a short video which I'd like to play. Back in 1960s, I'm sure most of you would know, there was a test called the marshmallow test, which was conducted by psychologists Walter Mischel and Ebbison. So they were psychologists, so they wanted to identify attributes in children that might give them clues of their success in life. So as part of that research that they were doing, they conducted this test at Stanford University. So I have a short video. So let's take a look at the video, then we'll briefly discuss about the test itself. I'm not sure if I shared my sound, so let me reshare it with audio just to be sure. And hopefully you can hear the audio.
Okay, sit in that chair. All right, here's the deal. Marshmallow for you. You can either wait, and I'll give you another one if you wait, or you can eat it now. When I come back, I'll give you another one, so then you'll have two. But stay in here and stay in the chair till I come back, okay? All right. gonna go do something and then I'll come back.
It smells yummy. It smells really good.
All right, so I'm gonna leave and then I'll come back, okay? So you can either eat it right now or you can wait. Either way, okay? Okay. How'd you do? Did you do good? You did?
Yeah.
You wanted to eat it, didn't you? Yeah. So did I tell you to give you another one? Okay, now you can have both. You need them.
That was a very funny video. And you could see all varieties of people or children. Somebody were just smelling, others were tasting, maybe a small bite and big bite. So when they conducted the test, they had similar experience with variety of children. And what they found was 1/3 of the children who took the marshmallow test actually waited for the second marshmallow. Remaining 2/3 of the children could not wait. And then they followed their life and see how did they do in their education and their jobs, etc. Those who control their their senses and could wait for the second marshmallow, they did generally well in academics and also had higher SAT score. And also what they found was the part of the brain which determines leadership skills was also more developed in them, those who control their sense. So as you could see, the self-control of urges leads to success, definitely in material realm, but also in spiritual realm. And we'll see a few slides related to that. Before I continue, any comment or questions on the marshmallow test video, or did you see this before, or did you hear something similar, some other test which was similar? Do you want to share something? It's generally intuitive that when you put up some austerity, you generally think that the result at the end would be a lot more rewarding. And this test, which was done, also is in that line and proves the same. So now we'll go into detail of the first text which we saw. So in the text, it refers to a word vega. So what is vega? Vega means urge or urgency. So like there is something which you want it now. Like most of the little small children, like if maybe a year or 2 year old, when they want something, like they are not going to wait. They want it now. They'll cry. They'll make sure they get the attention and they get what they want. If they're hungry, then they get the food. Or if they find something shiny, attractive, they want it now. So that Vega is that urgent sense of wanting now, and that's what Vega refers to. And there are 6 urges called out in the text. Those urges are of speech, the eagerness to speak, the urges of mind, the anger, tongue, belly, and genitals. These are the 6 urges referred in the text. I see a comment. M. Partha says the marshmallow exercise, even at lesser than 5 age, is similar to this. Yes, that's true. I'm not sure of. I mean, if are you referring to like another test which was of similar nature, Mark?
Yeah, the controlling the urge, right? I used to share that with my children.
Mhm.
The children who resisted for a longer time show the self-control more.
Yes.
It's a very famous marshmallow exercise that they did with less than 3 years old.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. Again, it just reminded me. I absolutely agree. We have to have the self-control, and that's the hardest to get.
Very true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and what across different texts, whether even if you look at some of the regular texts, even there you want to work hard, and persevere before you succeed. And the same thing even in spiritual realm as well, where you definitely need to have sense control to be able to then come above and start exploring or practicing your spirituality. So let's look at some of the specific which are called out. So this, in the purport of this text, Prabhupada, who wrote the purport, writes that what are some of the challenges of controlling senses, and how can we go about doing it? And he says the famous wisdom literature, Srimad Bhagavatam, which started where Parikshit, who's a king, who came because of a curse, he only had 7 days left to live, and he wanted to use those 7 days to purify himself. So he wanted to ask more deeper and questions. So as part of series of questions he was asking, one of the questions he asked was, what is the purpose of atonement or prayaschitta, as the Sanskrit word, if the person is not able to control the senses? Meaning, like, if you don't have sense control, and if you make a mistake and you atone or do some prayaschitta, but if you don't have sense control, you'll go back and keep doing the same mistake. So what is the use of such atonement? He compared such atonement to elephants bathing. So elephants, who typically in a group, they go to a river or a lake, and they go and they bathe nicely. And once they're all clean, they come back up, and one of the first thing they'll do is take dirt and put it all over their bodies. So if this is what they were going to do, what was the purpose of cleaning their body? Same way, if you were going to not have sense control, then what is the purpose of doing any prayaschitta or atonement? Because it looks meaningless. So in response to that question, Sukadeva Goswami says that that's true. That you cannot negate a sinful activity or a mistake or actions performed without any sense control for sense gratification with a pious activity. So you cannot have positives and negatives canceling each other out. It doesn't work like that. But what you can do is, because sense always has to be engaged in some sense objects, it needs to find an object where it can be engaged. So instead of engaging the senses in sense object, resulting in losing the control over senses, we start engaging senses in supreme or supreme consciousness or spiritual activity. Then it's more satisfying, and then it will slowly start losing the attraction towards sense object, resulting in giving more sense control. So the actual attainment of prayaschitta, of which is going to be real and lasting, is reawakening our connection with supreme or supreme consciousness, and reviving our spirituality. That's how you would be able to control your senses. So that's how he starts the purport. Any questions or comments on that before I go to the different urges? You can unmute yourself and share your thoughts, or you can type in chat box. I see Linda says, I remember the band Queen had a popular song with the lyrics of "I want it all and I want it now." So true of our society. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that band, but I'm definitely familiar with "I want it all and I want it now." Being myself, at times being in that state, and I've seen others, including children, being in that state. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, Linda. Any other thoughts or comments? No? So let me continue with a few more slides. So how to, so as Sukadeva Goswami says, we have to revive our supreme consciousness so that we can control our senses. So how to revive the dormant supreme consciousness? It's been called dormant because it all exists. We are conscious being, and our connection with supreme, it's already there. It's just dormant. We have to cleanse it and revive. So how to revive that? So traditionally there are tapasyas or austerity performed, including different yoga practices like Ashtanga yoga, or performing austerities and celibacy and mind and sense control and yama niyama. So there are various practices. This is called traditional tapasya as per the Vedic system of knowledge that one can perform, leading to reviving the supreme consciousness. Or there is another path, which is Pancharatrik tapasya, where there are certain do's and don'ts. In do's, you work with a guru or a teacher. You practice under his direction. Those who have already gone through the path, who know how to practice, so you work with them. And you also associate with other spiritual beings, so that you can share and discuss, ask questions, reflect, and make progress. Like how we all are coming together and discussing these topics and learning from each other. So those are some of the do's in Pancharatrik Tapasya, which is followed. And some of the don'ts include 4 regulative principles within that. That includes eating spiritual food, which is non-violent. So you don't harm other living entities or disturb them. But whenever you can have your food, you could prepare it through non-violent means, and you always offer it to Supreme and thank him for making sure that food is available so that you can sustain your body, maintain your body. So that is one of the regulative principles. Second is no intoxication, which means refraining from alcohol or other substances like tea, coffee, etc. So that's so that you are you're not putting yourself in a situation where you don't have control over yourself, potentially leading to taking actions which are not conducive for your spiritual practices. The third one is no gambling, because it's kind of an intoxication where you want to just increase your greed. So it is not favorable for your spiritual practice in life. And fourth one is refraining from illicit sex. That is making sure you are working within the framework of marriage and faithful relationship, etc. So those are some of the principles of Pancharatrik Tapasya which can be followed. So in amongst these two, tapasya or austerities between traditional Pancharatrik tapasya is considered to be important and better, and primarily because there is a guidance and association. Also, one of the ways of following this Pancharatrik tapasya is application, and that includes self-control of these six senses. That is a part of Pancharatrik tapasya, and that's how you revive your supreme consciousness. So let's look at next slide. The first one is out of the six urges, the first urge which was mentioned by Rupa Goswami was Vacho Vegam, which means the urge of speak. I'm sure you all have come across people who just can't stop themselves from talking. Just they want to keep talking, and which is fine. But what happens is, if you are, but what Rupa Goswami says, he's trying to compare talking mundane things to croaking of the toad, which typically, as some of the saying goes, if the toad croaks, then it invites snake to come and devour them. So instead of that, if we use our speech to engage in spiritual activity, talk about spiritual knowledge, or talk about helping others, making spiritual progress, or discussing about Supreme, then that's the right application of speech. So one question might come is, why is talking compared to inviting death? Because it's kind of inviting snake or inviting death. Does it speed up the time and you die soon? The actual meaning is, like, if you spend your speech on mundane things, time will go by and you will realize that you have spent your life in mundane activity, and you are near to your death. So instead, you should focus on making sure that is engaged in practicing spirituality and discussing about Supreme. So Vaish has a very nice video about this. So we can take a short look at it, and maybe we can just point. Yeah, go ahead, Sundar.
No, I just had one comment about the previous slide.
Sure.
I was just thinking about the hierarchy when you were talking about the different senses, and especially restraining the senses. I was thinking about why is that that restraining of the senses is recommended in the Yoga Wisdom text. And I was just thinking that because according to the Bhagavad Gita, there is a hierarchy that's mentioned about, of course, we have a multi-dimensional existence, and how Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita talks about how there is a hierarchy. There is matter, then above matter is the senses, and above the senses is the intellect, and above the intellect is the self. And by just giving into or indulging the senses, we satisfy the senses, but we don't satisfy our true self. And that's why I think restraining, because the senses or the mind or the intellect is not the self, the body and the mind is not the self. And of course, as Vaij many times mentions, we have to take care of the body and the mind because they're valuable tools. But at the same time, overindulging them is not going to really satisfy us because we are different from them. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that point out.
Thank you, Sundar. Yeah, you're right. There is a hierarchy: sense, then mind, then intellect, and then finally self. And self engages with the world through the senses, and depending on how it uses intellect to guide the senses and mind to what to engage, it ends up either engaging mental activity or spiritual activity. So you're absolutely right that's why we have we have to start controlling the senses so that it can be redirected to spiritual activity. Thank you for bringing that important point up. Any other questions, or anyone else have any thoughts or
Thank you.
comments? No. So
I think Mark came on video. Did you have any point, Mark?
okay. See, I will see a short video from Vaish, who also talks about how we can have speech control, and then maybe we can discuss if you have any reflections on that.
In the Bhagavad Gita, there in the 17th chapter, Krishna talks about the austerities of the tongue. So there's several ways he talks about it. He said you should be truthful. Your words should be truthful, beneficial. They should be avoid speech that offends. They should be pleasant, and you should also regularly recite mantras. These are the 5 directives. So now in the commentaries by the great teachers of yoga from days of yore, there is this point about using your speech to instruct others. Who should you instruct? People who sign up for it. Don't offer free advice here, there, and everywhere, because it falls on deaf ears. I mean, try instructing your parents sometime and see what happens. It's like, hey, Mom, Dad, I'm going to tell you a little something about life, and they're like, you don't tell us, we tell you. It's not an appropriate context to pass on knowledge. But if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I want to hear what you have to say, or even like, you're my teacher, and you tell me something, and then even then you have to be a little careful, because people are sensitive. You have to go around the ego and actually present it in such a way that it's pleasing, and they can appreciate it, put it in context. So there are different contexts for speaking according to your relationship, also the time and place. I have a friend who's really expert at organizing and managing, and he's just a leader, a great leader. So I've been in a lot of meetings with him because I'm on in like board of directors kind of things. And so I watched him and learned, because he doesn't say that much. I'm like volunteering for everything, and how about this? And then then after watching how somebody who's seasoned at it would do after some years, I realized that, well, he doesn't say everything. And then I asked him about it. He said, if you try to bring points constantly, then everyone just takes it as noise, and you have to pick your battles. Find the things that are most important and then bring it up. Like, that's in the context of meetings. You probably all have that experience also. If you're the one who speaks up on every point, people don't necessarily start tuning you out a little bit. There's that person again, bringing up his or her opinion. So come in on the parts that really matter. And you have to think about that. What's the most important topic that trumps all the other ones? Of course, if you have nothing to say, there's an old saying, he had nothing to say, and then he said it. So a lot of people have nothing to say, and they say it anyway. And then everyone's like, why did you bother? So try to add to the conversation. And the main point is, if you have a service mind, just talking for the sake of filling in space so you can keep a job is a little bit onerous, I would say. But if you have a service mind and you're thinking, how can I add to the conversation in the best possible way? Then your speech comes out well aligned. Think, how do I serve here? What's the best way to serve? There are other ways to speak when you're in a circle of people in corporate or anywhere else, and that is like, I want to impose my will on everybody else by the way I speak, and I have to be heard over everybody else. There are different degrees of that, but it's not that helpful, that kind of speech. So yeah, according to what's needed of you in a particular context, do the needful, but keep a service mind. Try to speak in a way that actually is helpful. If you do that, then your speech will be nicely accepted. And if it's not, what can you do? You did your best, right?
I like some of the point Vaish makes here, which basically means like the urge to speak is in all of us, but choosing what to speak and when to speak is very important. And also, as you mentioned, using it for service, because when you serve others, like that's one of the spiritual practice as well, where everyone is a conscious living entity. And when we have a mood of serving others, we are trying to make them happy. When we make them happy, the Supreme is also happy. So like just a couple of days ago, we had an all-day workshop. It was a leadership workshop where there are a few contentious points were to be discussed, and hopefully we were hoping to resolve. Generally, I am on the lower side of talking. I generally don't talk much, and that's given that was my nature. And the first half of the day, when I was invited to speak, I shared some of, not speak, but at least share my thoughts, because it was supposed to be a discussion. I generally had it, I refrained, I just gave a few points, but not a lot. But the afternoon, when the contentious topic, which was very important, determining some of our strategy and roadmap go forward, was to be discussed. At that time, I put forth my thought and very in detail to influence why we should go in the direction we should go. Given I had not used anything in the morning, so when I spoke at that time, it was well received. Like people wanted to definitely were open for it. It was well received, and I could influence the direction. So when I saw this video today morning, I just could connect to what Vaish was saying, that you pick what is the most important appropriate time, and say when you have to say. And the only other thing I also find myself doing is when somebody has done well, then I don't hold myself back. I go really sincerely appreciate them for what things they have done well and how it has helped me or others. And there is a natural tendency. So that's another way you can use your speech, where like a honeybee who always goes and picks the flowers which has honey. So everyone has goodness in them, and whenever you notice goodness in anyone, go and tell it to them. We do two things: when you encourage them to maybe do more of those good things they have been doing, and second, as Vaish says, if you that's where you're paying attention, then you take that part with you. So by saying that, slowly, you'll also start developing some of those qualities in you. So those are some of the ways in which you can engage speech to elevate yourself and others around you. Sundar, I saw you came on camera. Did you have anything to add?
Yeah, just a few points, but I really liked the video and some of the points you mentioned about how you spoke at the right time. Not and especially when it's meant to create an impact, and there was substance in it. So thank you for sharing that experience, your work experience there. So one point I had was that I remember, Vaish mentioning before how tongue is a rudder. Rudder is this small object, and it's shaped like a tongue, but actually it's there in I think flights and also in the boat, which determines the direction of how the boat moves or the flight travels. So I was just remembering that point, that how the tongue has these two functions, which is to taste and to speak or vibrate, and then that pretty much determines the direction of the life, because speech has an impact. Whether we realize it or not, the words that we speak, it can be uplifting, encouraging, and as you were mentioning, and can be impactful. Of course, it also is an expression of the state of our consciousness. What is there inside is what is going to come out. In fact, Prabhupada, he remarks that, in a lighter sense, fool is not discovered until he opens his mouth. So externally, anybody can appear like anything, but then the moment, one opens their mouth, then you can see, what what is inside. So I think it's a reflection of a lot of things, and speech, when it's thoughtful, when it's well thought through, and when it's beneficial for the listeners, it can have a really powerful impact. And those are some thoughts I wanted to share.
Thank you, Sundar. Yeah, I agree. As Vaish mentioned, like fool is not, as you said, Prabhupada also said same thing. Fool is not discovered until he opens his mouth, and tongue is the rudder. He's as Vaish says, is the most important sense you have, because your words create your world, and what words you speak determines what world you are creating, because that's what is important to you. So be careful on what you utter, because that's what will create your future will be.
And it also, just to add one more point, whatever we feed in, like through the ears, through the other senses, is what also going to go to our heart and mind, and what is going to come out.
Yes, absolutely. So let me go through a few more slides.
I think, Jamie, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, second one is, thank you, Sundar. So the second urge is urges of mind, and mind, as we know, always wants to be jumping from one thing to another. So here, one of the examples given is, suppose you have a very precious jewel at your home, and you hear that your first neighbor was, there was a theft a week ago, and another neighbor had a theft 2 weeks ago, and third neighbor had a theft yesterday. So like there is some other theft going on, and you have a very precious jewel in your room. Then what will you do? And I mean, there is a thief potentially outside. You will do anything and everything to protect it. Like you will have very elaborate lock arrangement, security arrangement, including locks and chains and maybe motion detector controls, etc., etc. You put all the arrangements to make sure the precious jewel that you have is safe. So similarly, the consciousness that we have, like that we are, is compared to that room, and the jewel is our connection to our supreme, and that is what sustains us, maintains us. And the thief outside the room is the Maya or illusion, and Maya's job or purpose is to come and confuse us and take the connection from the supreme away from us. So that's its job. It's primarily to purify us. That's the reason it's doing what it's doing. But then our job is to make sure we don't get confused by the actions of Maya or illusion, and don't indulge our senses in sense gratification, losing our connection to Supreme. Our job is to engage our mind such that it is engaged in spiritual activity, in serving Supreme, so that we purify ourselves and we elevate ourselves. So another example which is given is like if you have a small child, and if you just leave the child alone, it will go and potentially find all dangerous objects, like it might put finger in electric outlet or play with fire, etc. So what do? Then typically you give some toy to the child, and once the toy is given, the child plays with the toy and is no longer looking for other dangerous thing. Similarly, for the mind, we have to engage the mind in spiritual topics and stories of Supreme and serving others. And once it starts getting that higher taste in those activities, it will slowly start separating from the lower activities and modes and engage in higher activity. Towards that end, if we enter into a dark room, which is full of darkness, and we can't see anything, and we are walking, we're stumbling, etc. How do we get rid of darkness? I mean, we can't punch darkness out. We can't cut darkness. We can't chop darkness with a sword. The only way to get rid of darkness is actually by switching on the light. So once the light comes, the darkness goes away. Similarly, when the spiritual topics come in, and the discussion about spirituality and supreme comes into one's life, then the lower modes, lower habits, which are filled by Maya, naturally go away from one's life, because the light is replacing the darkness. This is called out in a wisdom text called Chaitanya Charitamrita, where it says, Krishna Surya Sama Maya Hai Andhakar, Yaha Krishna Taha Nahi Maya Radhikar. It basically means when the Supreme or Krishna is compared to sunshine and Maya is compared to darkness, wherever there is sunshine, there cannot be darkness. So we have to fill our life and activity with spiritual topics, with stories of Supreme and serving others, so that we can slowly get the mind attracted towards it and removed from all the other sense attraction and objects that it engages in. I'll just quickly go to a couple of more slides before.
Can I just add one point here?
Sure, go ahead, Sundar.
Yeah, this it's regarding the dealing with the mind. Of course, manas means the mind, the chatter of the mind. So one point, just few points that I recollected was, Vice talks about, if you don't like what you're subjected to, then change the subject. So I think that's a really good point. Many times, we may be looking at news or what's happening around the world, and we may feel, dejected or negative. So we can always change a subject to something more positive, that's more inspiring. And maybe listening to a talk that's inspiring, listening to a podcast, or reading some books that's inspiring, and then immediately, we feel enlivened. And another point I just wanted to bring about, a more practical point, is that many times, at least in my case, I think that we may do our routine work, and we may be busy during the day, and many times we equate relaxing to just browsing on the net, or just mindlessly doing some stuff. But recently I've realized that actually it's not really recharging. We need time to recharge and refuel, and that's very different than just mindlessly doing something or just browsing through the net. So recharging and refueling means doing something that's inspiring, that that really recharges our energy. Anyway, those are some thoughts I wanted to share.
Yeah, thank you, Sundar. I fully agree. Mindless browsing, or as I think Mayank spoke a couple of weeks ago, the me time when we just do what we feel like good for, like we feel good about, like browsing or just watching news, TV, etc. Doesn't recharge, because our true self doesn't connect with mental energy, and to recharge truly is consciousness, which is a spiritual being, a spiritual entity. We need to engage in spiritual activity, and once we do that, like how Vaish gave the example of a bird which is put in cage, and you keep polishing the cage, but if you don't feed the bird will die. Someday, what bird is compared to ourself, which is consciousness, and the cage is compared to the body. So if you just feed all this thing but don't take care of the consciousness, it will eventually die. Thank you. So a few more minutes left, so let me cover a couple of more points quickly. The next urge which is mentioned is Krodha Vegam. So there are 6 anarthas or dangerous things which are mentioned. One is lust, anger, greed, envy, pride, and illusion. And out of those, anger, they all agree it's very bad and dangerous. because then you don't have, like when you're angry, based on your perception, maybe there is typically get angry because you feel something wrong was, and there is some injustice, so you cannot tolerate that, and you become angry. And typically in that, given you no longer have control on your own self, you are likely going to do an action which is you will regret later. And the anger, was it like anger? Shastra or wisdom literature, there is a fine line between anger using you and you using anger. So if anger uses you, then you're likely going to make mistakes. But if you use anger for the right purpose, then potentially it might have a good outcome. So there the example given is, and I'll give two more examples. One is, for example, there was a time when, it's in one of the wisdom stories, Hanuman, who went in search for Sita, who was kidnapped by Ravana in Ramayana. He found her, and later he wanted to go and ask Ravan to free Sita so that she can go back and live with her husband Ram. Ravan didn't agree. Not just he didn't agree, he actually lit up his tail, and he became very angry, and he wanted to teach Ravan a lesson. So he burned the entire palace and the city to teach him a lesson. And in the end, he realized that Sita, who was kidnapped, is also in the same city. So he became very morose, like they harmed Sita in this process. But of course, she was safe. So even if you have good intention, but they may still have unwanted result. So you need to be very careful that you don't let anger use you. And also when you're using anger, be very careful. What is your motivation and what is the outcome you want to achieve to be sure that you're using anger in the right way. Another story which is given is a story of Narada. So Narada met a snake, and given Narada is a very advanced spiritual being, he was able to transform the snake to become more pious in nature, and the snake stopped biting anyone. He said, "No, I will not harm other living entities." Soon all the villagers got to know that the snake doesn't bite, so they started mistreating it and started beating it, torturing it, and it started having bruises, etc., all over the body. After some time, Narad visited the snake, and he saw it in a very bad condition. So asked him what happened, like why are you like this? Snake said, "I'm trying to follow the principle that you told me, that not to harm others. So I've stopped biting, but now people are beating me and taking advantage." So he said, "I told you not to bite, but that doesn't mean you can't show your fangs. So definitely, if you are under threat, do show your fangs so that people don't take advantage of you, but don't bite either." So definitely, when required for the good reason, we can be assertive, but try to control our anger, because generally its outcome is not favorable. There are two more Vegam mentioned in the text. One is Jiva Udra Vegam, which is uncontrolled eating. So, as we all know, obesity is the #1 killer in the world today. All the diabetes and other diet-related disease which everyone has. That's because of all the the sort of food we eat and the lifestyle we have is not favorable. So to mitigate that, Rupa Goswami encourages to eat spiritual food because that will purify our consciousness, and also fast, maybe periodically, so that you can give your body a break as well. I'll skip this slide. And the last is Upastha Vegam, which basically means control your genitals. So genital should be used to beget spiritual children, because we would be reproducing, and one of the way to look at it is, if we bring in another living entity, conscious being in this world, then it's our responsibility to help them understand spiritual knowledge and make progress in spiritual path. So if we use our genitals towards that mean and maintaining marriage, then that's the right way to use, instead of using it and outside those framework. So these are the 6 urges in this, and some of the ways in which we can control them, which was mentioned in the first text by Rupa Goswami. So one of the questions which might come up is, this instructions are for students, so why does it start with qualities of guru or teacher for student? The answer is, Dhira is a person who controls all urges, and Dhira is qualified to make students all over the world. So once you control all these urges, 6 urges, then you are qualified to make students. And seeker aspires to have seer's quality. So that's why he starts with qualities of guru, which you should aim for, so that you can then follow, practice, and attain those qualities. So that was a quick summary of the first text of Nectar of Instruction. Any final questions, comments before we sign off today? Thank you, Sundar. Thanks for joining today and sharing your thoughts. Very helpful. Mark, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Mark, for joining today. And Linda, yes, thank you for joining today and participating. So thanks everyone for joining today, and I'm hopeful that I should be back next week and we can continue the discussion with him. And please keep the transcendental vibration going, and let's sign off with Hari Bol. Hari Bol, Hari Bol,
Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Thank you.